Hello, everybody. Good morning to those connected from North America, Latin America, East Asia, and South Asia, and good afternoon to our friends from Africa and Europe. Welcome, and thanks for joining us on this conference on the challenges of reconciliation for a Jesuit institution of higher education today. My name is Susana Di Trollio. I am the Executive Secretary of the Kirche Network, and I will have the pleasure of moderating this conversation today. This global webinar is organized by the AJU Best Practices in Jesuit Higher Education Program and the AJU Task Force on Reconciliation and Peace. This is the inaugural conference of a series of webinars on the mission of reconciliation that will be organized during the following month. We will have webinar with the author of the best practices in reconciliation and peace in Jesuit University that were published in the third issue of the AJU Best Practices Program. As you know, the Best Practices Program is a joint global initiative that seeks to collect, share, and discuss good practices in Jesuit mission integration, formation, and management developed by our Jesuit University worldwide. We invite you to visit the AJU website and read all of the 18 best practices on reconciliation and peace that we just published. Today, we have the honor of listening to an extraordinary panel of experts who will share with us their reflection on the challenges of the mission of reconciliation for our Jesuit University. On behalf of the AJU Task Force on Reconciliation and the Best Practices Program, I would like to thank Father Joseph Christie, Father Elias Lopez, and Father Jacques Hart for accepting the invitation to be part of this webinar. We also want to thank the Pontifical Javeriana University Cali, especially the Institute of Intercultural Studies, for helping us to organize this webinar and for providing the Zoom platform. Likewise, we thank the Pontifical Comillas University in Madrid for providing the simultaneous translation in English and in Spanish that you can use during this conference. Thanks Yvonne, Vilca, and Alba Rodriguez for your support in translating the conference. Before we begin, allow me to explain some instruction on how you can activate the translation service. As you can see on your screen, it is very easy. You only have to click on the button on the bottom of the Zoom screen, find the interpretation button and click on it and select the language that you want to listen the conference on. You can listen in English or in Spanish. The structure of the webinar is very simple. We will listen to the three panelists and then we will have a question and answer section. So please send us your question using the chat on the bottom of your screen. Now I would like to introduce our speakers. First, we will listen to Father Joseph Christie. Father Christie is the Secretary for Higher Education of the Society of Jesus and the chair of the board of the director of the International Association of Jesuit University, AJU. He holds a master's degree in mathematical statistics from Madras University, India. He also earned his MBA and PhD in business administration with a specialization on decision sciences from St. Louis University in the United States. Father Christie has a long and a rich academic and administrative experience. He was the president of Xavier Association of Management Institutes, which is the association that comprises all Jesuit business schools in India. And he was also the treasurer of the International Association of Jesuit Business School. He was the director and professor of decision science and Xavier School of Management. And in addition, for nearly 2 decades, he was associated with the Loyola Institute of Business Administration in Chennai, India, as a professor, dean, and finally director of the institute. Father Elias Lopez has studied, now I'm going to switch to Spanish, sorry. Father Elias López ha estudiado filosofía y es licenciado en psicología clínica. Ha trabajado en el teléfono de la esperanza y en la rehabilitación de drogadictos. También con el servicio jesuita de refugiados en distintos continentes, donde ha desarrollado la misión de reconciliación y paz de la Compañía de Jesús. En los últimos 10 años, el padre Elías López ha trabajado como profesor e investigador en 2 temas: liderazgo de discernimiento sinodal y transformación de conflictos y paz. Es miembro del Grupo Europeo y también del Grupo Internacional de Liderazgo del Discernimiento de la Compañía de Jesús. Es chair de la Task Force de la AJU en Paz y Reconciliación. En febrero próximo, el padre Elías trabajará a tiempo completo en el área de reconciliación y en la de recursos humanos del Servicio de Jesuita de Refugiados de América Latina y el Caribe. Para aquellos que tenemos el gusto de conocerlo, sabemos que su pasión es la misión de reconciliar en el contexto de refugiados. Now, Father Jacques Hart, he has studied mathematics in Belgium, philosophy in Leuven, Belgium, and Munich, theology in Leuven and Oxford, and until his retirement, he taught theology at the Faculty of Theology and Religious Science of the KU Leuven. He was the co-director of the Transdisciplinary Advanced Master Program in Conflict and Sustainable Peace and chair of the Center of Liberation Theology. He has also been the academic director of UXIA in Belgium and continues on its board. He also continues researching on reconciliation, common apostolic discernment as a theological methodology and environmental concern. He is currently the parish priest of the KU Leuven University Parish. Now let me give the floor to Father Christy to begin with his presentation. Christy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Susanna, for your introduction. Okay. Okay. I don't want to go into the topic. Has already been introduced by Susanna. So thank you, Susanna, for the introduction, and good evening to all the participants of this webinar. I'm indeed delighted to be here to inaugurate this webinar with my comments on the challenges of reconciliation for Jesuit institutions of higher education today. There are 2 questions given to us before us. What does the mission of reconciliation imply for Jesuit higher education institutions today? What is the importance of this mission for the Society of Jesus and its universities and colleges today? I just want to share with you some of my random thoughts on this. Today, the world is in great turmoil, and there is an urgent need for reconciliation and justice. It is more than 250 days since Putin started invading Ukraine. It has caused untold miseries to people, affecting mostly the vulnerable, women, children, and the elderly. The number of refugees is increasing day by day exponentially. According to now, the count is around 7.7 million, in addition to another 8 million displaced internally. It has also incredible impact on the other parts of the world, increasing the prices of commodities like wheat, fuel, impoverishing the poor, depriving them of the basic food, and causing food insecurity in Africa. So we are living in a context of constant conflict and war. Not only war between countries, and also civil wars and conflicts in various countries like Ethiopia, in the Middle East, Yemen, Afghanistan, Myanmar, etc. The other is seen as an enemy, a stranger, and not a neighbor. The other is seen with hatred, hostility, and contempt. The other is not respected. We see a growing polarization in terms of religion, in terms of ethnicity, language, caste, tribe, color, and nationality. I don't need to give you examples. We already know about all of them. And the democracy is in peril in many countries. We talked about it at BC Assembly. Yet Nicaragua, the Catholic Church is under attack. Dissent is not tolerated. As you know, the sisters of Mother Teresa were expelled. The bishop is under threat, and finance has been cut for the Jesuit university because they protested against the government. We also see increasing nationalism around the world. There's a far-right politicking taking place in Modi in India, Trump in the US, Georgina in Italy. We have Netanyahu yesterday at Israel. We can just go on. The migrants are seen as a burden because they are taking away the pie meant for me. So there is always certain opposition, hostility to have unwelcome migrants. There's also politicization of religion. It has become a fad. The politicians are using religion for their own advantage, for their vote bank. There's also cleavage between the rich and the poor has been increasing. It is also creating a lot of tension within the country and between countries. So today, the situation is much worse than what it was 6 years ago when the GC36 came out with a clarion call to the Society of Jesus to be companions of mission of reconciliation and justice. In the higher education, we see our students are the products of this age, which is torn between war, conflicts, tension between people. So they may unconsciously develop these type of attitudes, hatred towards others. We are called to be companions in the mission. How could we help? How could the students, the faculty, staff, our collaborators be people of reconciliation? How could our institution be instruments of reconciliation and justice? I think that's what we need to focus on. As a task force, we have been reflecting on it for a long time. There's no one need to tell us the need, urgent need for it today. It is time for action. Concrete choices and strong gestures of peace are urgently needed. We need to start with Ignatian pedagogy. We already know the context. We have an experience. Based on that, we need to articulate our reflection, get into action. And from this action, we need to learn to get back into action, other actions and so on. So I think we need to get back to action. Some of the possible programs we could think of, I've just listed 7 of them. There could be many more, but I think we need to focus on some of them in each of our institutions. First of all, we could think in terms of organizing training programs for our students, staff, faculty, our collaborators, for even alumni, for an attitudinal change to respect others, not to hate others, whether they are different color, religion, and so on. I think there's a bit, not just tolerating, but we need to respect and live with them. The second one, we could think in terms of immersion and experiential programs. For the Colburn Bark is to underline the need for experience for the students. So experiential learning will help them to understand the reality and to learn what to do that. Thank you. We can also think of courses on interculturality, intergenerationality, or courses on other religions, as Father Arturo Souza mentioned to us at Boston. We can also play a mediating role in bringing people together, like Pontifical Catholic University Ecuador was doing it very recently, Javeriana Kali was doing. So we could also play this role. More importantly, research and advocacy as higher institutions we can do, as Housal has initiated. Once again, we discussed it at Boston. Kirker Network can help us share some of the best practices and experiences of those involved in conflict resolution and bringing about peace. And seventh, much more, each of us is called to be a credible witness of this reconciliation, peace in our lives, as individual Jesuits, as faculty members, or as institutions, in our policies of recruitment, admissions, in our relationships, in our attitudes, the type of research we are involved in, the way we treat our collaborators, our students, the people of other religion or other color, language. I think that we are called to show by our example on what we stand for as people of reconciliation and justice. So I like the task force to create a network of partners, universities, and individuals who could help us achieve this important task given to us to bring about reconciliation and justice. So I'd like to thank the Kirker Network, especially Susanna, for arranging this webinar. And I hope we can continue our discussions to come out with concrete action plans for our higher education institutions to be effective instruments of reconciliation and justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. We'll remind to all of the people that have joined us today that you can share your question through the chat on the bottom of your screen. Now, Elias, thank you again for joining us today. So the floor is yours.
Muchas gracias, Susana. Muchas gracias, Padre Cristi. Vamos a seguir avanzando en la presentación que vamos a ver ahora en 3 puntos concretos. El primer punto es sobre la fuente ignaciana de la reconciliación, el ADN de la Compañía de Jesús. Por otro lado, vamos a trabajar cómo se ha ido desarrollando esa narrativa a lo largo de los años. Y por último, algunas lecciones aprendidas para dar paso también a Jack Hurst, que las pueda desarrollar esas lecciones aprendidas. ¿Cómo responder a todo lo que el Padre Cristi ha presentado como retos de la compañía y concretamente de las universidades o de la educación terciaria de la Compañía de Jesús a nivel internacional? ¿Cómo responder al reto de la reconciliación? Lo primero es tenemos que ir a las raíces, a San Ignacio, que escriben las constituciones y que escriben la fórmula del instituto en 1550. La misión de la Compañía de Jesús, la Compañía de Jesús fue fundada para reconciliar a los desavenenciados, es decir, a los enemistados, a la gente que tenía conflictos entre ellas. Cómo transformar conflictos y reconciliar. Esto es parte esencial del ADN misional, de la misión, visión y valores de la Compañía de Jesús, que está recogida en la fórmula de 1500, fórmula del instituto de 1550. Pero la compañía había sido fundada ya hacía 10 años. ¿Por qué aparece esta frase de reconciliar a los desavenidos en esta formulación 10 años después de haber sido fundada la compañía y no en la primera formulación de la misión de la compañía en 1540, sino, como digo, en 1550, 10 años después. Pues eso fue debido a que el padre, seguimos con la siguiente slide, por favor. Eso fue debido a que el padre Polanco es el que dice que esto es inmutable, esta formulación, reconciliar desavenidos de la misión de la Compañía de Jesús, es parte inmutable y sustancial de la Compañía de Jesús. Es decir, tiene que estar presente para siempre, no se puede dejar. Seguimos adelante con la presentación, por favor. Y ahí tenemos Nadal, secretario también del padre Ignacio, de San Ignacio, igual que el padre Polanco, dice estas cosas. Primero, que reconciliar desavenidos es una respuesta a la séptima bienaventuranza de San Mateo, bienaventurados los que trabajan por la paz porque serán llamados hijos de Dios. Eso es un punto muy importante. Y segundo, que también es muy importante, y dice Nadal, secretario del padre de San Ignacio, es que no puede faltar esta misión de reconciliar explícitamente, no puede faltar de la fórmula del instituto del Mission Statement de la Compañía de Jesús original. ¿Por qué? Porque a lo que se han dedicado los jesuitas en los 10 primeros años de la compañía, junto con Ignacio, Francisco Javier, Jayo Polanco, Landini, Araoz, Broet, entre otros compañeros jesuitas de la primera compañía, es fundamentalmente a transformar conflictos, a reconciliar gente que estaba en oposición, que eran enemigas. Por lo tanto, es algo que está desde el comienzo y que tiene que permanecer para siempre, y por eso está en la fórmula del instituto, en el carisma inicial incambiable y que se tiene que sostener a lo largo del desarrollo de la Compañía de Jesús hasta nuestros días. También dice Nadal, secretario de Ignacio en aquel momento, dice que este oficio, es decir, este trabajo, esta misión, es una misión muy difícil y para la cual necesitamos preparación. Por eso estamos desarrollando todos estos programas de preparación, de capacitación a nivel de educación terciaria para esta misión que está desde el comienzo. Pasamos a la siguiente, si me hacéis el favor. ¿Seguimos? ¿Sí? Bien. Vámonos ahora a saltar 425 años después de aquella fundación donde ya aparecía la reconciliación. Y lo que vemos en el 1975, en la Congregación General 32, que se reúnen todos los jesuitas de todo el mundo en ese año para reformular la misión, actualizar la misión de la Compañía de Jesús, aquella de San Ignacio, 425 años, actualizada hoy día, y dice que no se pueden separar estos tres conceptos: fe, servicio de la fe; promoción de la justicia al servicio de la reconciliación. Entonces, tenemos tres conceptos que no se pueden separar de la narrativa de la Compañía de Jesús, de la misión de la Compañía de Jesús, reinterpretado, como digo, 425 años después. Pasamos y damos un salto ahora a ir viendo la narrativa hoy día. Por lo tanto, tenemos el primer triángulo. Vamos a ver cómo se desarrolla la narrativa en 4 triángulos. El primero es fe que hace justicia al servicio de la reconciliación. Ahí, ¿cómo está ahí? Segundo triángulo, la reconciliación es con Dios, con los otros, con uno mismo también, el otro que llevamos dentro, y con la creación, con la naturaleza. Entonces, tenemos reconciliación con Dios, nivel teológico; reconciliación con uno mismo y con los otros, nivel antropológico; y relación y reconciliación con la creación, con la naturaleza, es la dimensión cósmica, las 3 dimensiones de la reconciliación. Esto se complejiza cuando leemos la narrativa con otro triángulo más amplio, que es el triángulo de las preferencias apostólicas universales, que son 3 elementos más uno que es transversal. El primero es mostrar el camino hacia Dios a través de los ejercicios espirituales y del discernimiento espiritual. La reconciliación con Dios, esa dimensión que decíamos teologal. La segunda, dentro de los otros, reconciliación con uno mismo y con los otros, especialmente con aquellos que son excluidos, que son violentados, que son víctimas, con los excluidos. Y por último, la opción preferencial por la casa común, el cuidado de la creación de la casa común. Y esto dice que se hace también acompañando a los jóvenes, caminando con los jóvenes hacia un futuro de esperanza, cuando la esperanza está tremendamente amenazada por todas las violencias que el padre Cristi mencionó anteriormente. ¿Cómo educar en la esperanza en un mundo tremendamente roto por multitud de violencias? Vale. Esa es un poco la narrativa en la cual nos encontramos. ¿Cómo abordarlo a nivel de universidades? Pues con las tres funciones, y añadimos un cuarto triángulo, las tres dimensiones o funciones de la universidad o de la educación terciaria. A través de la investigación, es decir, creación de nuevo conocimiento para responder a nuevos retos globales, nuevas violencias que están interrelacionadas hoy día, cómo investigar, cómo responder a estas violencias, tanto económicas, políticas, jurídicas, psicológicas, es decir, medioambientales, cómo responder con investigación. Esa investigación de lo nuevo, de las nuevas formas más eficientes de responder a la reconciliación hoy día en todos estos niveles, llevarlo al aula, es decir, llevarlo a la educación, programas educativos a los que hacía referencia también el padre Cristi, y por último, transferirlos, llevarlos como servicio a la sociedad más amplia, llevarla de las aulas y de los centros de investigación, llevarlo a la sociedad en su conjunto. Esa es la narrativa, digamos, esos son los conceptos que desde época de San Ignacio se han ido desarrollando, sobre todo últimamente, para ver cuál es nuestra narrativa de la reconciliación, que como vemos es compleja, pero bueno, por ahí vamos avanzando y esa es cómo entendemos nosotros hoy día nuestra misión de reconciliar y de reconciliación y justicia, como dice la Congregación General 36. Y ahora, dos conceptos que queremos introducir que son parte de lo que hemos aprendido desde esa narrativa. Hemos aprendido en la práctica, fundamentalmente, estos dos aportes vienen del trabajo con el Servicio Jesuita Refugiados, que desde el año 2010 venimos trabajando la misión de reconciliar, porque el padre Adolfo Nicolás, anterior general de la Compañía de Jesús, en el 30 aniversario del Servicio Jesuita Refugiados, nos planteó que como organización ayudáramos a la Compañía de Jesús en su conjunto a entender qué es esto de la misión de reconciliar. Entonces nosotros estábamos como Servicio Jesuita Refugiados en zonas de guerra donde hay conflictos armados, ¿verdad?, causados por muchas variables, como ha dicho el padre Cristi, pues, ¿qué podemos aprender como Compañía de Jesús desde las prácticas del Servicio Jesuita Refugiados en reconciliación? Y ahí tenemos dos conceptos. El primer concepto es el que aparece aquí, la reconciliación preventiva. ¿Y qué entendemos por reconciliación preventiva? Es algo que hemos aprendido en el trabajo con refugiados y desplazados forzosos de todo el mundo. Se repite una misma experiencia. Para el trabajo por la paz, la reconciliación, la justicia transicional, la transformación de conflictos, la sanación de trauma, lo que vemos que más ayuda es que los padres y los abuelos se fijen en la siguiente generación, en sus hijos y en sus nietos. Es lo que más motiva, intentar que los hijos y los nietos no hereden la violencia, sino que se liberen del círculo de la violencia, que no queden atrapados en el círculo de la violencia de los padres y de los abuelos, que no queden atrapados. Entonces, lo que más motiva es prevenir la violencia, y eso es lo que llamamos prevención o reconciliación preventiva. Ese concepto, trabajar la reconciliación desde la motivación liderada desde la siguiente generación, que es presente también, los hijos, los niños, los jóvenes, trabajar desde ahí nos parece fundamental. Por eso, Journeying with the Young, caminar con los jóvenes pasan a ser grupo clave estratégico para trabajar la reconciliación preventiva. Y estos jóvenes los tenemos evidentemente en nuestros colegios y en nuestras universidades. Vale, eso es el concepto de reconciliación preventiva. Usar el vínculo de amor con los hijos, entre padres e hijos, para, usando esa motivación radical, la más potente, trabajar por la transformación de conflictos aquí y ahora. Ese es el primer concepto, reconciliación preventiva. Y el segundo es el concepto de reconciliación discernida, del cual os va a hablar ahora nuestro compañero Jack Hurst. Muchas gracias, Jack. Sí, ahora te paso el turno a ti.
Gracias, Elías. Jack, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Christy. Thank you very much, Elias. I hope we'll get the slides also. Yes. So Elias and Christy have already set out a little bit how the idea of reconciliation and the practice of reconciliation is at the heart of Jesuit life and of the Society of Jesus, and how it is like the DNA of this society. And that means it gives its structure to the Society of Jesus. How is this, the Society of Jesus structured? But it also gives the impetus to act in the world itself, to relate to the world. And as Christy said, it is a world that is in pain. It is a world that needs conversion. It is a world that has to pay attention to the future as a sustainable option and possibility. So I will reach out to these questions with regard to specifically the universities, and specifically that second point of action that Elias has set out next to the preventive reconciliation idea. I will do that in 3 questions. I will first of all indicate how reconciliation, common apostolic discernment, and transdisciplinarity are connected for a university work. And then I will ask myself the question how this is becoming possible, what are conditions of possibility for such transdisciplinary discerning reconciliation, and how our universities can become leaders in that kind of process worldwide, which has already also been indicated by Elias and by Christy. So first idea, the connection between reconciliation, discernment, and transdisciplinarity in universities. In the Ignatian perspective, and that colors the idea of reconciliation that we have, in the Ignatian perspective, reconciliation is a process of common apostolic discernment. There is a conflict between people, between antagonists very often. The conflict can be very violent. In the Ignatian perspective, the challenge is to sit together with these eventual antagonists and with people who are mediating between them, to sit together to conceive of a common future, a shared future that is sustainable and that is peaceful. That means we will have to think about how we are going to bring this about, and about what kind of idea we have of this future, what kind of vision we have of a peaceful, sustainable future. And that exactly is a process of common apostolic discernment. That means we will be looking for consolations, and we will be trying to avoid desolations and to see the deeper movements of consolations that also lie behind these desolations. We will also cultivate inner freedom, detachment in a certain sense, indifference, as Ignatius would say. And that means basically the inner freedom to listen to God's voice as present in the other, who can eventually be an enemy. So also give the space to God to speak through the enemy. And it will also mean that we care for a vision that we receive from our acquaintance with God in Jesus the Christ, the vision of the kingdom, the vision of a peaceful future to which we can work and which we can explore in the present by committing to it without exactly knowing how this history of building that vision will turn out. So that's a first. In the Ignatian perspective, reconciliation is a process of common apostolic discernment. The second note with that, and that is just a remark actually, but it's an important remark, that is that processes of common apostolic discernment, and common apostolic discernment is what has built the Society of Jesus, such processes, which are at work now also in these processes of ecclesial synodality and the efforts at synodality in the church, such processes involve reconciliation between the participants in these processes. That means we build communities where people reconcile to indicate a future path for themselves together. There's that idea of togetherness, there's that idea of the future, and there's also, of course, the idea that we will listen only really to one another if we are willing to discover how God, in each one of the participants in the discernment, how God is speaking in each one for all of the people involved in this. So it is, if you want, a learning community, a community that attempts to discover how it can move forward. Now, in institutions of higher learning and in universities, these forms of common apostolic discernment translate in efforts at transdisciplinary work. And that also is a very important notion. Transdisciplinarity means, of course, intradisciplinarity, and we know in reconciliation that in processes of reconciliation that it is important to develop like an architecture of reconciliation and an architecture of peace in which very many perspectives are involved, but these perspectives need to come together in the contact with the reality that is lived in the conflict. So by paying attention, for example, to those who suffer the conflict and by giving them a place at the table of this discernment, this transdisciplinary discernment. The form universities can do that is by committing to this interdisciplinarity ad intra, in a certain sense, and then to commit at the same time to the field in which they will work. The transdisciplinarity will allow to build in a learning community a new type of creativity and to develop new kinds of approaches. Okay, that's the first slide. If we can have the second slide, Camilla, thank you. Yes. Now, we want to develop Ignatian transdisciplinarity so as to develop the idea of Ignatian discerning reconciliation. Ignatian transdisciplinarity is the willingness to discern spiritually, that is, to take a perspective with the eyes of God, the articulation of research, education, and service to society in the mission of reconciliation. And I was very happy to see also that Christy and Elias also mentioned that this also means within the university. The mission of reconciliation is not only an extra. If the university is not witness to reconciliation in its own structures, then this will not be trustful work of the university. Now, what are conditions of possibility for such transdisciplinarity, that is discerning reconciliation, to exist? Now, I've put a couple of conditions of possibility, but there are certainly many more. But these are, seems to me, very important, and I have learned in the. So enter into the unjust or violent context. Accept that there are conflicts and don't flee them. Don't try to negate them, but try to find out who is suffering in these conflicts and how these conflicts may be signs of the time where God is calling us today towards rediscovering a peaceful, sustainable future together. And to do so, we have to listen to the voices of the discarded people who are suffering the conflict. At the table of discernment, of common discernment, these people have a special place and have special care. Usually their voices are not heard and are obliterated. But how can we give, and universities can have that function. So for example, with regard to nature, a French philosopher has emphasized that the universities are the advocates of the suffering nature that has no voice when we decide about our common future. It is also the willingness of a university to engage in transdisciplinary processes of common apostolic discernment. That's not self-evident. Very often our universities are financially fragmented into intradisciplinary faculties. I see that in my own university in Leuven. It is very difficult to find money and to find resources to work together. Another one is a deep conviction that God is at work, that God is the reconciler at the heart of creation, that creation is a process of discernment and of reconciliation in the long run, and that therefore we need to have the different actors sitting together at the table of discernment. And we have to listen to them and discover how God also is working in our enemies. That is an application of the ad amorem at the end of the spiritual exercises. And then the invitation to listen to the young and the longings of the young for a future reconciled world in peace. What Elias said about preventive reconciliation is part of such a discerning reconciliation and is part of a common apostolic discernment that aims at a sustainable, peaceful future. They carry in their bodies and in their longing for life, they carry that vision, even if they cannot always express it in a coherent, formal way. We can take the third slide. The third slide, please. Yeah. The third slide is how can universities become leaders in such commitment of God to peace and reconciliation? How can they become instruments that lead forward and then inspire others? And I think Jesuit universities and in Yahoo, they will have to look and articulate the signs of consolation and hope for the young and for the world through such transdisciplinary discernment, attempting to bring the young together and to give them the tools and the presence at the world to formulate these visions and longings that are in them and to care for that. The other is to build in the universities reconciling communities of practice through transdisciplinary discernment at the service of peace, advocacy, and politics in the concrete situations in which the universities find themselves in their own context, political context also. The general has emphasized very much this aspect of political commitment in his last speech in Boston, and I think it's an important point of view. A university cannot be disconnected from the reality in which it lives and is present. To become actors and conveners of tables of discerning reconciliation. But that means they should learn that in themselves also. They have to walk, the universities, the talk of reconciliation amongst the staff and the alumni and in the university communities. And that is not an easy way to go. And Father Christie has also emphasized, sorry. The slides have disappeared. Yes, it means that I'm running out of time. But I've at the end. So how can we then, that's a further question, promote trans-university collaboration at the service of reconciliation? And that is the structures of Yahoo as a whole, how can they become discerning, reconciliatory DNA for the Jesuit universities and universities worldwide. I stop here. I'm sorry, I've gone over my time, I think. Susanna, sorry. Yeah.
It's okay, Jax. It's an extraordinary presentation. Thank you so much to Christy, Elias, and Jax. Now I give the floor to Maria Camila Mantilla from Javeriana University so she can share with us all of the questions that the participant has written in the chat. Go ahead, Camila.
Muchas gracias, Susana. Hay una pregunta que Elías ha ya respondido en el chat de preguntas y respuestas, pero quisiera abrir la posibilidad de que quizá el padre Christy y Jax pudiesen resonar un poco ante esta pregunta que nos hace Nelson, y es cómo diseñar caminos para transitar entre la escuela y la universidad como una gran alianza para la reconciliación. Ya Elías nos ha compartido algunas claves en el chat. Quisiera preguntar a Jax y al padre Christy si quisieran sumar a esta pregunta de esta gran alianza por la reconciliación en el tránsito escuela-universidad.
Escuela, te refieres a escuela primaria y secundaria, estamos hablando, ¿no? Esa alianza entre educación primaria y secundaria y la educación universitaria como parte de un continuo educativo.
Yes, if I may, we have been discussing also in our region with the regional superior on these issues, exactly how to bring this about. And one of the things I've learned in Spain, and I think Elias could tell much more about that, is what is called la parada ignaciana. So to teach young people today to take a step backward, to look at the situation and to reflect at the situation as a kind of a sign of the time. And a sign of the time means there is something important going on here. Reconciliation is necessary. But how do I see that God is at work in the people who need to be reconciled, myself included? And these are things that can be taught. So the development of methods, I think, for such teaching would be interesting. Mostly, I think in our universities that is not done, because the people remain on their disciplinary positions. So in our university, can we develop a course? Is maybe not the right way of doing our practice, but give time for the development of the students precisely in that capacity to be actors for reconciliation and actors for discernment. We have classes at the University of Leuven, we have classes of religion, and this is one of the things that we try to do, is to bring the students in that kind of practice in the different faculties that there are. That's what I would spontaneously immediately respond. But it's a very important question. I would agree with that. I think it's maybe the crucial question about how to listen to the young and give them a voice. Father Christy, I'm sorry, maybe I cut you. It's okay. Yeah. There was a second question I understood. Oh, there.
Sí. Hay una segunda pregunta que se evoca a la luz del comentario que Flor ha puesto en el chat, y ella nos dice que apelando a la pedagogía ignaciana es importante situar la propia experiencia contextual, cognitiva y afectiva en los procesos de reconciliación. Quizá la pregunta puede estar encaminada a pensar cómo transitamos en esa tensión de una misión global de reconciliación que acoja o recoja también estos contextos particulares en donde también la reconciliación tiene lugar. Quisiera quizá dar 1 o 2 minutos a cada uno para que pudiese dar un aporte, unas claves a esta pregunta de los contextos en una misión global, de estos contextos particulares que nos acogen también en una misión global. Entonces paso la palabra primero a Elías, luego al padre Christy y luego a Jax.
Gracias, Cami. Gracias, Flor, por la pregunta. Yo creo que es muy relevante porque en el fondo toca de algún modo lo que ya el padre Cristi dijo, la pedagogía ignaciana parte de los contextos y no puede ser de otro modo, ¿no? Entonces, la espiritualidad siempre cristiana y la jesuita siempre es muy realista. Por lo tanto, parte del contexto particular, que eso tiene que ver con la encarnación, ¿verdad? El misterio de la encarnación. Jesús se encarna en una cultura, en un contexto particular, unas coordenadas sociales, temporales, económicas, jurídicas, culturales, lo que fuera, ¿no? Entonces, siempre, siempre, es decir, toda reconciliación tiene que ser discernida, por eso hablaba también Jack Hurst de la importancia de que la reconciliación fuera discernida contextualmente, es decir, según tiempos, lugares y personas. Evidentemente tenemos una narrativa, una tradición sobre los valores éticos que supone nuestro modo de entender la reconciliación, ¿verdad? Antes vimos la narrativa, pero esa narrativa no puede ser esencialista, es decir, inmutable para cualquier tiempo, cualquier lugar, cualquier persona, cualquier grupo, no. Tiene que ser contextualizada y los actores directamente implicados en el proceso de transformación del conflicto y por lo tanto de la reconciliación y de la recreación de relaciones justas que han sido violadas por distintas violaciones de derechos humanos, pues esa relación tiene que ser recreada por los actores directos e indirectos, pero también afectados por el conflicto y tiene que hacerse contextualmente, es decir, no hay una respuesta, digamos, enlatada. Siempre nosotros cuando vamos a trabajar con comunidades que han sido victimizadas o con victimarios, siempre les preguntamos, ¿ustedes qué entienden por la reconciliación? Es decir, nos tomamos muy en serio la persona particular en su contexto y en su tiempo particular.
Gracias, Elías. Padre Cristi, no sé si usted quisiera hacer un aporte a esta pregunta. Jax.
Father Christie is opening up there. Yeah.
Yeah.
You go ahead, Jack.
Yes.
I mean,
Well,
I didn't understand the Spanish question. Okay.
Do you want me to continue or do you want to?
You go ahead. Go.
Yeah. I want to fully agree with what Elias was saying. One of the things that strikes me very much in the spiritual exercises of Ignatius is that he actually says, when we know the correct answer, there is no necessity for discernment to take place. Discernment takes place when we are in the face of situations that require a decision that will write history and that will move forward where we can make mistakes. That's the reason why in discernment processes, reconciliation itself and forgiveness becomes very important also. But the idea is that we are confronted with what one could call kind of wicked problems. There is no unique, clear solution. We have to decide to build a community that will take on the issue and try to find a way forward. And what we believe in the Ignatian perspective is that we can do that by listening to one another in the modus of God is speaking through all of us, for all of us, through each of us, for all of us. And so I think the characteristic of Ignatian reconciliation, and that's the reason why using the word discernment is so good, the characteristic of Ignatian reconciliation is that it will work with those processes of discernment and not necessarily with processes of this is the method, the unique method that you have to use to solve an issue. The según tiempos, lugares, and personas is crucial for most reconciliation processes and therefore requires discernment. I think that is a very important element, and that discernment translates in universities in the willingness for transdisciplinarity and including voices that have not been heard before. And so one of the interesting things happening today is that the native peoples, for example, are brought in through cultural studies as a group to which to listen, as providing also takes and approaches to reconciliation that in our Western structured universities, such as in Leuven, we have maybe never thought of. I don't know if that answers the question to a certain extent, but yeah, that shows why reconciliation has to be discerning. Yeah.
Muchas gracias, Jax. Veo dos preguntas más en el chat. Quiero invitar a los panelistas a responderlas también a través del chat, entendiendo que tenemos muy poco tiempo ya para cerrar. Paso entonces la palabra a Susana y las dos preguntas que están pendientes invito a los panelistas a responderlas.
But I don't know, I suggest that maybe Elias, you can answer the question about synodality, because that is a very, very key question that they posted on the chat. They are asking, how can a university collaborate on the process of synodality that the church and Pope Francis is trying to push forward? So if you can give us some light on this question, that will be great.
Gracias, Susana, y gracias, María Luisa, por plantear esta pregunta que es clave. Es decir, la sinodalidad, el proceso de sinodalidad es un proceso fundamentalmente reconciliador. ¿Por qué? Porque la sinodalidad está al servicio de la comunión, y la comunión es reconciliación. Comunión y reconciliación es lo mismo, ¿eh? Entonces, que tiene que ser una comunión, una reconciliación participada por los diversos, los distintos, incluso los opuestos, que hay dentro de la iglesia y fuera de la iglesia. Por lo tanto, una sinodalidad que sea diseñada y llevada a cabo por un sector solo de la iglesia no es sinodal. Y efectivamente hay sectores, como dice María Luisa, dentro de la iglesia que son opuestos a esa comunión sinodal. Entonces, ¿cómo trabajamos dentro de la iglesia? Espacios, digamos, de reconciliación de esa brecha que existe, esa oposición que existe entre distintas formas de entender la iglesia y el servicio de la iglesia a la sociedad en el mundo, ¿no? Entonces, la pregunta tuya, María Luisa, es muy pertinente, es muy crucial, porque un proceso de sinodalidad que no aborde como iglesia hospital de campaña, ¿no? Que no aborde las heridas dentro de la iglesia, no va a ser creíble cuando queramos abordar las heridas fuera de la iglesia. Por lo tanto, me parece muy importante. Bien, ¿qué es lo que están haciendo las universidades? Tu pregunta. Pues las universidades están investigando que una propuesta de liderazgo y discernimiento sinodal al servicio de una iglesia reconciliada y reconciliadora. Tenemos ahora mismo 3 tesis doctorales trabajando este tema. Entonces, ¿por qué? Porque hay que desarrollar un concepto, una metodología y herramientas, y después medir el impacto. Efectivamente, este concepto, estas metodologías y estas herramientas son herramientas eficaces, los esfuerzos están siendo productivos, es decir, por los frutos, diríamos, en clave de discernimiento, se conocerán si estas herramientas, estas aproximaciones son adecuadas. Y la universidad no se puede saltar ese paso porque es su función fundamental, la investigación, la docencia y la transferencia del conocimiento. Efectivamente, las universidades se tienen que plantear de forma seria esto y progresivamente sí que hay proyectos que se van sumando a este ejercicio. Hoy, por ejemplo, me he enterado que en India los jesuitas están muy metidos también en esto, ¿no? Bueno, pero no solamente en India, en Colombia también conozco procesos al respecto, aquí en España, ¿verdad? Hay en distintos sitios. Bueno, gracias por la pregunta porque es muy pertinente. ¿Cómo las universidades suman a la misión de reconciliar, las universidades de la compañía, a la misión de reconciliar de la iglesia? Es decir, eso de Pablo en Corintios, ¿no? Somos todos embajadores de la reconciliación de Cristo. ¿Y eso cómo se entiende en cada contexto? Bien, para eso, que es complejo, Y Orbegoso creo que también plantea esa pregunta, la complejidad, ¿esto cómo se hace? Pues para eso hay que, lo que decía Jack, hay que discernir transdisciplinarmente cómo esto se entiende en distintos contextos. Y esa es la investigación y la docencia y la transferencia que tienen que hacer las universidades. ¿Sí? No sé si quizás respondo también a las dos preguntas que había ahí, de algún modo, Susana, no lo sé.
I don't know if Joseph Christie, if you
Orbegoso.
want to add something to the question about the relationship and the role of university to the process of synodality for Jacques. How can Jesuit University can collaborate with the process of synodality?
And the component of reconciliation within synodality.
You want to say something, Christy? Yeah.
Basically, they wanted us to be aware of, first of all, the whole synodal process. The second one, how our education apostolate of higher education can be part of the whole process of synodality. So I think that's what we have been asked to participate by the dicastery for synodality. Synodality also kind of how we could practice within our institutions, how we could have a dialogue, the way common discernment, as Jacques has mentioned it, can take place within the thing. There is also, we can be a model of synodality, the way we live and practice. So that's why I think we could think of that.
Yeah. I don't think I would want to add to this. I think Elias and Christy have said what had to be said, but there's one more question I see there concerning our polarized societies, and I think that is a very, very important question. It is every day I see it, how the forces, political forces, move towards synodality, polarization in our societies, and not only in our societies, also in our institutions. There's two things that I would like to say, and the first one is this is one of the reasons I think why the general spoke in Boston about the political commitment, that we have to, that universities also have a political responsibility, precisely because of those polarizations in societies, and to show that those polarizations are actually destroying a society itself. And so the faith in democracy, not a polarizing democracy, but a discerning democracy, has to be rekindled in a certain sense. And that's a political task. And that has to do with how the polis is built. And the second thing that struck me very much, I'm very fascinated by that expression, early Ignatian expression of reconciliar a los desavenidos. This is the extreme to which in our societies people have become desavenidos, how they have grown out of one another and not accepting one another's existence anymore, in a certain sense, not willing to listen to one another. And then when I was reading the examples of early Jesuits reconciling villages and cities where there had been such polarizations, this gives me a little bit of inspiration. What Landini did in the beginning of the Society of Jesus is in that perspective quite remarkable, huh? Managing to bring together polarized people. Landini, of course, had one advantage. He could preach to people who still claim to believe in God. That is not so easy for us. People will not come to the church to listen to our homilies to be reconciled. So how can we work from our universities as Jesuits, as Ignatian motivated people to act against these polarizations? And I think then what the general said concerning politics is a very important element.
Thank you so much, Jack. Thank you, Christy. Christy, you are going, okay, go ahead.
No, no, I mean, I already mentioned it in my presentation. All that we require is attitudinal change, attitude towards the other and respect the other, not just tolerating and so on. Somehow only we see the other as the other, not a neighbor. I think that creates the polarization. I think that creates polarization due to various factors. So how we could, I mean, universities, as Jacques and Elias mentioned, there has been a lot of efforts being taken in terms of Christian-Muslim relationships, Christian-Hindu relationship. A lot of efforts are being taken in terms of dialogue, in terms of research and publications and so on. So we could need to strengthen this area, and also not only in the religion, but also in terms of sociologically, how we could bring about certain peace. You know, today I was just reading some of those old manuscripts about Ignatius starting the universities, and Ignatius was very keen that Protestants also should study in our Jesuit institutions. He never excluded them, though there was a lot of problems with the Protestants, whether Lutherans or Hittites, and he was very keen that there should not be any partiality. I think already then, 400 years ago, 500 years ago, and Ignatius thought about bringing peace, bringing people together. I think that's what we need to work together.
Thank you, Christine. So I now give the floor to Camila for some announcement and for the closing remark. Thank you so much to everybody for joining us. Once again, thank you to Christy, Elias, Jax, Camila, Yvonne, Alba, and the technical team that has been supporting us with the Zoom. So Camila, the floor is yours, and then we have some closing remarks from Father Christy, Elias, and Jax. Go ahead, Camila.
Gracias, Susana. Gracias a el padre Elías, Jax, Cristi, por sus intervenciones. Muy rápidamente, en nombre también de la Task Force de Reconciliación y Paz, queremos compartir muy brevemente 3 proyectos en los que hemos venido trabajando en el último año, en donde hemos acogido también muchas de las recomendaciones y muchas de las apreciaciones que emergieron de la Asamblea de Boston de este año. Y queremos principalmente extender la invitación a quienes han participado de este espacio a vincularse, a sumarse, a ser parte de estas reflexiones y de estos espacios, que son principalmente los 3 que pueden ver en la pantalla. El primero es un ejercicio de mapear iniciativas, un geovisor, un mapa interactivo que permita identificar quiénes somos y dónde estamos aquellas personas que venimos trabajando de manera concreta por la paz y la reconciliación. Esta es una iniciativa que venimos fortaleciendo y que va a hacerse cada vez más robusta en la articulación que podamos tener con todos y todas ustedes, quienes están también en los territorios, en las ciudades, en las regiones en donde venimos apostándole a la reconciliación. También venimos trabajando en una articulación, una comunidad de prácticas y aprendizajes en donde abrimos un espacio para compartir esas buenas prácticas y estas claves que nos permiten poner en práctica y en marcha la reconciliación desde los distintos contextos particulares, pero también acogiendo en el cuerpo, en el corazón, en nuestro trabajo, la misión de reconciliación y de la compañía de Jesús. Y finalmente, sabemos que hay centros e institutos que vienen trabajando e impulsando de manera concreta, explícita, el trabajo por la reconciliación. Y esta es una gran experiencia de una larga trayectoria desde las universidades, que es importante reconocernos, saber quiénes somos y articularnos en el proceso de discernir conjuntamente cómo hacer el trabajo de la reconciliación en clave de las funciones de las universidades, en clave de la investigación, en clave de la docencia y del trabajo de servicio a la sociedad. Creemos que estos institutos y centros pueden fuertemente impulsar y dar claves frente a cómo las universidades podemos seguir trabajando por la reconciliación. Y para ello los invitamos y las invitamos a ponernos un correo a través de este correo que hemos puesto en el slide, tfreconciliationiaju@gmail.com. Nos pueden poner un correo y abrimos los canales para que nos podamos articular y seguirnos articulando en esta misión. Muchas gracias, Susana, por este trabajo y gracias a los tres panelistas. Te regreso entonces la palabra para que podamos hacer el cierre del espacio.
Go ahead, Christy, for your final words. Can you hear me, Christy?
Yeah, thank you. I don't have anything to say. I think we have said enough. So I leave it to.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, Elias and Jax.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much to everyone. Muchas gracias a cada uno y cada una por hacer espacio para conectarnos. Ciertamente es una responsabilidad y es una misión que nos desborda a todos y por eso es fundamental unirnos. Nelson Olaya hablaba de redes, ¿verdad? Redes de discernimiento para la reconciliación y la sinodalidad, en el estilo sinodal, ¿no? De Francisco. Yo creo que sí. El Padre General ha recordado últimamente la importancia del GIAN, del Global Ignition Advocacy Networks, ¿ok? Y ReconciliaNet, de algún modo, este proyecto de red global para la paz y la reconciliación, intenta responder a eso, ¿no? Cami nos ha invitado a conectarnos, a mandar un email y a estar conectados. Ciertamente necesitamos esa ciudadanía global conectada y todas nuestras instituciones pues están invitadas y por favor nos necesitamos, es decir, conectémonos, digamos, oye, aquí estoy yo interesado con esto, tengo este recurso, conectémonos porque realmente lo estamos necesitando, nos los pide el Padre General, nos los pide también el Papa Francisco y nos los pide sobre todo el mundo y la gente que sufre tantas violencias, ¿sí? Por lo tanto, vamos a conectarnos, por favor. Y muy agradecidos por el rato que han dedicado ahora.
Thank you, Elia. Go ahead, Jax.
Yes, it was for me a great pleasure to feel that we share the same DNA, so that everybody who is here shares that same DNA, that same obsession is not the right word, that same passion for reconciliation, but also that same longing for committing to processes of reconciliation concretely in the context in which we are. And I think that is what makes us young. And that is a way of listening to the young people too. So
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susanna, for arranging
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks for everybody. Thanks, Jack. Thanks, Elias, for leading the whole task force, and hope to see a lot of action in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Take care. Gracias a todos. Un fuerte abrazo.